So, George, can you believe it? They've made a 6th Scream.
They have. It's Scream 6 is here, and it's doing very well at the box office.
I've managed to see lots of social media marketing for it. I'm very aware it exists. I've heard some decent things about it, but you've gone to see it. George, tell me more.
Okay, so Scream 6. So you're right, very effective marketing campaign where people have been going around towns.
It does itself, doesn't it?
Brilliant. I saw clips as well of when they were doing screeners, they could get the audience to scream, so a bar would fill, a bit like Monsters Inc. So the film could start. This film can't start, and so you've screamed loud enough to.
Sorry, was it Scream 2 where the Scream guy killed someone at the premiere for a Scream film everyone was wearing a ghost face?
Well, I've only seen Scream the original going into this. This is important, but you're right. In Scream 2, the metatextuality is amplified because the events of Scream 1 are then made into a film called Stab.
Yes,
and it's at the premiere of which, and there's this whole sort of copycat thing, and that very much bleeds into Scream 6.
Nice.
So just to lay the groundwork about Scream 6 a little bit, because if you were like me, who may not have seen a lot of Scream films, if any at all, I was thinking the 6th film that's a sequel to the belated reboot of a franchise that's like 25, nearly 30 years ago. It doesn't typically fill me with excitement. It doesn't really have originality written all over it. Yeah, it's a bit of a red flag.
Halloween, we're looking at you.
Exactly, right? But I went in regardless. So I've only seen the original Scream. What can I tell you about the plot? Basically, this picks up after the events of Scream 5. I'm not calling it Scream as it was released as the reboot version. It's Scream 5, and we pick up some of the same characters in this film, much like we did with Scream into Scream 2, etc. And Sidney Prescott, who was the original character from the original films, who came back as well, played by Neve Campbell, hasn't returned. So she said some very interesting things off camera about her role within this franchise and her pay and stuff. It was really interesting. But so she's not in this franchise, and it's kind of got a bit of a fresh air about it. It's the first Scream film, I think, to not be set in like Woodsboro or wherever it is.
Yeah.
This is now in New York City.
New York, new rules. Which I just
is that the tagline
on the bus that's got New York, new rules, which could be
it could be anything. I know. Anyway, so it picks up with some of the characters from Scream 5. But guess what? I haven't seen Scream 5 either, but that doesn't really matter. All you need to know is there are 2 sisters. An older sister, sort of mid-20s, called Samantha Carpenter, a nice sort of horror genre surname there, in the same way that Billy Loomis, one of the characters, is Loomis, is from Halloween as well, some sort of horror references in there. She's the older sister. Her younger sister, I can't remember her name, but she's played by Jenna Ortega, who in the time between last year's film and this year's film has become a massive, massive star.
She's everywhere.
And it is the first time I've seen Jenna Ortega in anything, and I have to say she is really great. She's such a great screen presence. I enjoyed every moment of her. And what I liked is that obviously the film was probably made before Wednesday, but the film clearly recognised her talent, and she uses her a lot. She's not second fiddle at all. She really is in this film a lot, which is great. So if you're a Jenna Ortega fan, you'll be happy. There's a couple of other characters who have carried over as well. They were high schoolers then, and now they've moved to the college. They've gone to New York to study, okay? So new city, new rules. There you go. So I went into Scream 6 a little bit trepidatious, like I said. It doesn't thrill me with confidence when you've got this sort of so far down the line that we're having the 6th iteration. But I went to see it with a group of friends, and I had a much better time than I anticipated. I think Scream 6 is really solid fun, okay? Let's talk about the good stuff. So first of all, it opens, but even before it opens, the BBFC title card comes up and it says rated 18 for strong bloody violence and stuff. And I think, thank you. About time. When I mentioned Cocaine Bear and The Menu and Knock at the Cabin and some other films recently, I said the problem was that they pulled their punches, right? They wanted to hook you in with a gritty premise, but then, didn't want to get their teeth really dirty when it mattered. This film accepts we're a Scream film, we're a slasher film, it's going to be 18, people are going to be getting stabbed, there's going to be lots of blood, and I thank it for at least going into with a good foot.
And I think we've all been able to tell that there is a big apprehension from, I think, movie studios to be bold and be 18.
Exactly.
Because they've been afraid of, losing out a huge majority of their audience, which
Exactly.
obviously you take kids to see the film. But, there have been so many outliers that have proven you can make shitloads of money with an 18 film.
Or an R-rated movie as it would be. But
America,
exactly. And this has, it has proven that point correctly because it is making a lot of money. So first of all, that comes up, and I'm like, great, okay, that's already a vote of confidence. Then you get this 15-minute opening sequence. Because going in, I should say, is that what I like the first Scream film. We both do. I know we talked about that opening sequence in the first film, how great that is. And what I like about Scream movies, or the one I've seen, is that it has thrills and it has chills, but it's also funny and witty and playful. And that's the whole thing in it. It's about horror movies. It's about being slightly meta.
Good mystery as well.
Exactly, right? And the first 15 minutes of this film really does a good job at understanding and capturing what Scream films should do and getting you back in. There is Samara Weaving is waiting at a bar in New York wearing a white roll neck dress, which is like a subtle costume reference to Drew Barrymore, another blonde in a white roll neck. And instead of getting a phone call, she's texting with the guy she's waiting for a drink for, right? And they speak on the phone. And it's, hey, I'm lost. I'm in the wrong block. I'm nearby. And they get talking, and the topic of horror movies comes up again. Why? Because she's a professor of film studies, and she teaches and specializes in slasher movies. And I'm like, I'm really enjoying this play on the original. I know. I'm really enjoying this play on the original, and the topic of films is in there as spoken. And then, he says, "Oh, I'm lost. Can you come out and see? Help me see where I am." And this is where the film really leans into and enjoys its New York setting. In this particular sequence, there's some stuff with an alleyway that it really plays up, which wouldn't have been kind of done in the same way in another setting. Anyway, and then that scene progresses, and then your expectations are turned, and then you have a sort of a second act of this 15-minute sequence, which then becomes, your expectations are then flipped again. And this 15-minute sequence ends with a punchline. And as the punchline hits, the title comes up, Scream 6, and all four of me and my friends just erupted in laughter because it was really funny and really well done. Wow, okay. We were like, good, I am in. This film is a Scream movie. Here we go. You get a lot of building with the characters, which is a tricky one because the film is a little long. It's 2 hours. It did feel a little bit long, did drag occasionally, but it's in a tricky position with its characters because it's like, okay, we know this is a Scream movie. We know you're here to see people get stabbed and get chased by Ghostface, but we also need you to invest in the characters. So which is it? We either spend time with the characters to get you to engage, and you say, oh, I want to get scared more, or we get just focus on the scares and you don't feel connected. So it has that slight balance there. It walks kind of a fine line. There are a couple of scenes where I thought, I don't really care. But then a couple of scenes I thought, well, it's good that you have that character investment there. So there's parties. It's college. It's New York City. What else works really well? I think that the other thing that, when I said it leans into its New York setting, there's a scene, and this is in the trailer, but I won't reveal too much, but on the subway. And it's, again, something that wouldn't have been able to do. It's just so iconically New York, getting on the subway, but it's Halloween. And this is in like the third act of the movie, and it's full of people in costume. And as you see in the trailer, the problem is that there's 6 people dressed as Ghostface. But what's also really fun...
The anonymity of a crowd, isn't it?
Exactly. But because the film has done a lot to cultivate your attention at this point, you're paying attention to this film because it's interesting, is that not only are there like 6, 7 Ghostfaces, but there's a Michael Myers mask, and there's what's the guy with the pins thingy head, not a razor head, Hellraiser. Oh, right, okay. But what I also like, there's also someone dressed as Florence Pugh from Midsommar. There's also 2 people dressed as the doppelgangers in Us, and I'm like, I'm really enjoying very subtle, modern horror community. And this whole sequence of, is this person on this carriage with me, the real Ghostface or person in a costume, is really well executed. There are a couple of every single like thrill beat works really well in this film. There's another bit in like a 7-Eleven that's very tense, and all the action sequences, the thrilling sequences, really work. When the blood hits and the gore hits, when it stabs, it stabs. So that's really, really enjoyable. It's funny. 90% of the time, it's funny when it should be, and there's a couple of times when it's silly to the point you're like, have I lost? Have we diverged now? Am I laughing at this because it's so silly, or is it being so silly deliberately? So I'm laughing at it, but it doesn't really matter because you're still having fun. So, for example, there's a sequence with a ladder, and I was like, surely that's deliberately silly, right? Because that's so just so ridiculous. Similarly, like Dermot Mulroney's in it, and he is chewing the scenery in a way that I was like, so much that I thought, have you misunderstood the joke of the film, or are you so deep within the joke of the film that even I can't tell if you're playing this straight or you're playing this deliberately hammy. But he's like saying, it's like one of those people who say the quiet bit loud and the loud bit quiet. Yeah. But he's gurning his way through this kind of, I'll get this fucking killer and do what I want. You know, like anyway, so that's very enjoyable. So the film has...
Well, I always thought David Arquette in the originals kind of overacted a bit.
Yes. There is this like touch of camp about the films, this touch of like shrillness that's kind of a hysteria, which is really fun. I mean, do you remember in the first one with like... what's her name? Rose McGowan gets stuck in the garage door and it goes up, you know, like that's kind of like, do you remember that? Where she like tries to crawl out? Like, that's ridiculous and it's silly. But anyway, so that's all the stuff that's working great and it's really enjoyable. So when it needs to deliver, it absolutely delivers and we were having a really good time. Like I said, a little bit too long. I think that another criticism I would have is that it like most films now, are really trying to build a universe and build a history. And when it tries to lean into, you know, incorporating the history
of my eyes for anyone listening.
Yeah, when it tries to lean into incorporating the history of 5 previous Scream movies, you know, Courtney Cox returns as Gale Weathers, but you also have Hayden Panettiere from Scream 4, and it's like, I know the film is trying to make this sort of very smooth coexisting universe, but I sometimes can't help but feel like this is a studio retroactively trying to see that their failed attempts at a franchise 10 years ago and this patchy sort of iterations of these films is actually one whole plan. So occasionally I felt like that was a little, it's a bit of a stretch to try and lean into this. We're not Star Wars here. We don't need to build this universe. And there's one particular use of slightly dodgy CGI where I was like, come on, it's a Scream movie. We don't need to have this seamless patchwork between all 7 films. But that said, you know, when I came out of the cinema with my friends, we were talking about The Mask because I saw it with a friend who hadn't seen any of the Scream films. Okay. And then my other friends had seen slightly more than me. And he was like, we were talking about how iconic and brilliant that mask is. And scary. Well, that's the thing. You look at the Scream mask and it captures exactly what the films are, which is it's, you know, grotesque and it's like a masquerade mask and it's carnivalesque, but it's could be funny. It's so over the top and grotesque. It could be funny, but it's uncomfortable. You look at that mask, you think that's a bit freaky, but it's not like a barbaric like howling wolf or something with like blood dripping out its mouth. It's just something, or it's, you know, whereas the Michael Myers mask is the opposite. It's completely devoid of expression. The Scream mask is so twisted and contorted. You're like, it provokes a really interesting reaction. And I think the film Scream 6 as a whole understands that the identity of this brand and the identity of the franchise and the identity of horror films lies, of this horror film lies in that mask. So really well executed, really fun, landed when it needed to. I laughed a good 5 times. There's some good sequences in there, bit long, but, you know, Scream 6, we all ended it. We all looked at each other and we said, that was really good fun, actually.
Because on one hand, you can go, oh my God, the 6th, but I know some middle ones are, I think 2 and 3 are actually fine as far as I remember, but I haven't seen 4 or 5. Anyway, if they're sort of going to endlessly make them, and our grandkids is going to see Scream 32 as far as we're concerned, as long as they keep being fun, aware, funny, scary, and fresh, and they're like and relevant to a new audience, then it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
And like to hear that is so great because we have had a lot of modern Halloweens which have not been very good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Well, do you know what it is? It's like, it's not perfect, but it really is what a Scream movie should be.
Yeah. Doesn't need to be better than that.
It is exactly, it completely fulfills the purpose of it existing.
I used to dress up as the Scream Ghostface for Halloween.
Well, that's freaky. But I mean, yeah.
As a kid. I
can see that. But also we were talking about the actors who play Ghostface. It's the way that their physicality moves with the mask that's brilliant as well, because he'll do the sudden turn with the head, and you'll look. It's just that the whole choreography of Ghostface, which is kind of got overlooked because we're so busy, you know, with the rest of it, is brilliant and it's really good. So Yeah, a good fun. I think it's so much better than you would expect, but it's exactly as it should be.
And never underestimate. So many actors have said that it's not a blessing to have your face covered and try and act, because all of a sudden you have to now rely. You can't rely on facial expression. You have to use everything else.
Yeah.
I can't remember which actor said this, but it's like acting with your left hand.
Yes.
It's like you no longer can use your face. You have to literally think about everything else and the speed at which you move your head and how you glide and move.
Yeah.
I think it might have been Tom Hardy saying something like that with Bane.
Yeah.
Not being able
makes
to have
sense.
his mouth. It was all eyes.
Also, it's one of those films that like you watch and you're like, this is clearly been put together with a bit of intelligence, with with an idea. These people making this film have a clear idea that they want to play with. There's the film sets aside a whole scene where people talk about the tropes of horror films and they go, well, actually, and it gets very meta because they're like, well, actually, last time, meaning the events that happened to them in Scream 5, well, that meant you that survived, but never trust you. But that means, hang on a second, what about you? Because, well, according to horror tropes, that means that, and I'm like, it could be a little bit forced, but I'm here for it. I like it. Here to stay. So who knew? Scream 6, good time.
Well, there you go, guys. If you've seen Scream 6 and you want to let us know what you thought, please send us your email to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. We would love to hear, as always, what you think and read it out on the show.